Hello, this is Dr. Jazairi. This is my Corona update number 14, I believe. I know it's been a while since I've done any. To be honest with you, making these videos are pretty exhausting because I do everything myself and it takes a good hour or so, sometimes longer. And I really, I got exhausted of just doing them for a while, so I wanted to give it some time. Let's see how things brew, and then maybe, hopefully I can give you some more information that's worth your time. I have a list here. So the global statistics as of today, again, the confirmed cases of people in the entire world with coronavirus versus the number of deaths is around 6.6%, and if you notice, it's slowly creeping up. I expected that because as the virus, there's been a delay, especially in third world countries, reporting these, and a lot of these countries don't have the, other than, social distancing and all that, once the patients get sick, they probably don't have the medical technology or the knowledge to keep patients alive as much as, other countries, and overall their health probably is not as good as other countries. So I expected the death rate to creep up a little bit. But again, as I've said before, if you look at the total number of cases in the world that are, patients who have the coronavirus, the percentage is probably, the death rate is probably going to be around 1%. That seems to be what all the experts agree on. So, that's obviously good news. If you remember remdesivir, I just want to give you an update on that, and I know it's been around, but you may not know the details on it. Remdesivir initially showed some promise. The stock for Gilead shot up, and then there were some studies, I believe from China, that they said it wasn't effective. And then we didn't hear anything from this drug, and then suddenly our government said they were going to start using it. The background on that, this is from NPR, National Public Radio, is that the CEO of the company went and lobbied and spent $2.5 million to get this drug back on trials. So, I don't know how you want to look at lobbying. There are many ways of looking at lobbying, but the drug is back. The last thing I heard, Dr. Fauci was saying that, once they use this drug, the hospital stay for these patients was about 3 days sooner or earlier they were discharged. And that's kind of the same with Tamiflu. If you look at Tamiflu, which we take for flu, it doesn't really cure anything. It just speeds up the process of recovery. But it has to be given, at least for Tamiflu, within 48 hours of, once you have your symptoms with the flu. And this is, I'm sure, the same with the coronavirus. I mean, once the virus spreads and it overwhelms your body, it's probably too late. Well, the problem is a lot of this, I mean, how do we know unless you test everybody? Because most patients are asymptomatic anyhow, or may have a 2-week period before they become symptomatic. And none of these studies so far have been peer-reviewed. So, every scientific data has to be reviewed by other experts and confirmed. So I'll leave you at that. That's where remdesivir is. I haven't really heard much more about it. And then I wanted to also talk about, the latest on how this virus is transmitted. The latest thing that I just read a couple of days ago was that we thought that most of these viruses come from bats. And somehow it got to an intermediate host, which was probably the pangolin. And then, the pangolin was traded in the wet markets and humans got in contact with it. They've done some fancy genetic works, and it seems like the coronavirus, or this strain of the coronavirus, which is called the beta coronavirus, which is in the bat, is different than the one that's out there, but it's kind of also the same as the one that lives in the pangolin. So it's a combination of both. So somehow these viruses became recombinant, and this is a middle, like their child, if you want to think about it. It's an offspring of the bat virus and the pangolin virus. But again, nobody so far has said that this was created in a lab. So that's all I can tell you. I know, if you remember, a few weeks ago there was a Chinese researcher at the University of Pittsburgh who was apparently found dead. And so that was kind of interesting, because all this stuff was going on with this lab leaking out, this virus leaking out of the viral lab in Wuhan. So I haven't heard anything about that yet, but again, so far nobody said that this is coming out of the lab. There again, so what's going on now? If you look, it seems like throughout the world, people are, countries are slowly opening up, businesses and this and that. So how do pandemics end? Well, there are two ways pandemics end. One is a medical way. So that means the health experts look at the data, look at everything, and they say, okay, we now confirm that this pandemic has ended. And there's a second way, which is usually happens faster than the medical way, and that's the social end to the pandemic. And at least in California, it seems to be everywhere. I do see that. I think people are just maybe getting numb or tired or frustrated, whatever the word is, with the coronavirus. Is it the most ideal thing? No, I mean, ideally we should all stay home, not do anything until there's a vaccine. So the vaccine, they're saying, is going to take at least 12 to 18 months. That is way faster than the average, the traditional way vaccines come out. Most vaccines take 4 to 5 years to come out. Some take 20 years. And some vaccines, some viruses, we have not been able to find a vaccine yet. HIV, is a good example. This virus, I'm pretty sure we can find a vaccine. It doesn't mutate very fast. It's going, we're going to make a vaccine for it. I personally, and I have nothing against vaccines. If you look at all the data with the vaccines and I'm blanking out, where you become socially isolated, not Down syndrome, but the other one. That was, whoever started that rumor fabricated some data, and there's a lot of things on that. So, but if you want to believe in that conspiracy theory, that's fine. But, there's no data that vaccines cause any of these mental issues. However, I personally, if the vaccine comes out in 18 months or so, I'm kind of leery of getting it. The reason is there's just not enough time to look at potential long-term effects of this vaccine. And that's why it takes 4 to 5 years. You need to follow these patients over and over a long period of time. And so what we have to do is, I'm sure we can get enough patients to get the vaccine, but, following them for a year or so, I just don't know if it's long enough. So I'll leave you at that. And then the question is, what's going to happen if they force your kids to get this vaccine before they can register to school? There's a lot of potential, situations that I don't know the answer to, and I don't know how the public is going to behave and what's going to happen. But I think what I'm seeing is that we are socially kind of going towards this pandemic is ending, whether a lot of more people are going to get sick or not. I don't blame people. I was hoping for the quarantine to end at the end of May. I thought that would be enough time, but really there's no end point to it. And there are some reports there is resurgence of this virus. Now again, but you have to be careful. For example, if you read that the 5 people tested positive again in Wuhan, I think it was, well, I didn't see the details, but maybe they were just passengers on a plane that came there and they were positive. So you have to know the details, but I'm sure we're going to have probably little spurts. How bad it's going to be, I don't know. And you know, it was interesting because you know, Cedars-Sinai, which is a very big hospital in Los Angeles area, you know, a lot of celebrities go there. It's a very well-known hospital. They closed one of the wings to devote it to purely coronavirus, and there was another hospital open in downtown LA just for coronavirus patients. But we really don't have a lot of cases in Southern California, at least, you know. So the question to me was, well, why are they doing this? The first thing that came to my mind is, you know, Medicare is probably paying well for diagnosing and taking care of coronavirus patients. So, I mean, I don't want to say anything negative, but there's probably pressure on hospitals to over-diagnose maybe, or if the patient dies, maybe there's some bias towards saying that it was caused by coronavirus because, you know, everybody's struggling financially. But then the other thing that came to my mind is, well, maybe everybody is realizing that people need to go out. I mean, they just, you know, businesses need to start opening up, and maybe they're preparing for another wave. Because the fear, especially in this country, was, as you know, everybody was afraid that the healthcare system is going to get overtaxed, that we're not going to have enough ventilators, beds, and then other patients who have other issues are going to, you know, die. And so maybe that's what's going on, or maybe probably is a combination of both. But unfortunately, there's some financial incentives to report coronavirus too, so keep that in mind when you see the numbers. What else? We talked about that. Again, just to go over, you know, how the virus, you know, how we catch this virus. You know, all the experts. If you run in the street or you're running, and people are passing you by, you're not going to catch this virus. There's some, I guess, some study came out where they sprayed bottles, and you know, and they said that it can go 16 feet or something. It was from Netherlands. Well, it wasn't peer reviewed, and there's really no data. You know, again, you have to read things carefully. So, you know, if you read in the news that, oh, you know, there was a cruise ship and you know, they wiped all the floors and there was coronavirus there. Well, how long has it been there? Is it alive? You know, dead viruses don't do anything to you. So, you know, again, we talked about this. You just can't read a headline and you know, what's the significance of it? I was talking to my wife, and I joked. I said, well, you know, I can go stand by the door of Costco. I think Costco opens from 10 to like, well, they changed their hours, but let's say 8:30. And everybody who comes in, I'll get a culture tube, and I wipe the back of their clothes. They could have shirts, they could have coats, they could have jackets, whatever. And I do that for a week. I can guarantee you that some percentage of those are going to come back positive. So, you know, we put a headline, you know, you know, people going to Costco has positive coronavirus on their clothes. Okay, so what's the significance of it? You know, it doesn't mean anything. So, you know, unfortunately, and I know people around me now, they're at the edge of being really anxious, and now they've gone to the other end. They've become obsessive compulsive. You know, and severe OCD, and the problem is, you know, in life we have, you know, there are certain things that are 100% for sure. Until the sun is alive, because it's going to run out of gas and it's going to explode, but in a few billion years, until then, the sun is going to go down and it's going to come back up. And when it does that, we get night and we get day. That's 100%. But, you know, and we're all going to die. All living organisms, 100% are going to die. But then the rest of our lives is just based on percentages. If you think about it, we're constantly looking at data and doing things based on, well, what's the percentage of doing this versus that. So the problem with a lot of these people who are just, this is getting out of hand, is everything becomes 100%. Oh, this coronavirus, I'm going to get it and I'm going to die 100%. Well, that's not true. Again, there's multiple studies now coming out showing that in the one from CDC where they look globally, 90% of patients who die have health problems, okay? And majority of these patients are over 65, and even in the young ones, obesity was a big one, diabetes, obesity, diabetes, and I think hypertension. And if you have obviously lung issues already, smoking history and this and that. So the chance of dying is really not that high. It's like, I live in Southern California, there's going to be an earthquake and I'm going to die. Well, no, the chance of dying from an earthquake is actually very low. Flying an airplane. Oh, I'm in an airplane, I'm definitely going to crash and die. Well, the chance is 1 in 3 million, the last time I checked. So, but with these people, everything now is becoming 100%. I am going to catch the coronavirus and I am going to die. I hope you can work on it on your own, but, they're talking about people having a lot of mental issues after, with this thing coming out. So, please, if you think you need help, go ahead and get help, because you don't want it to get out of control. There was an interesting thing that, I had talked to you before about maybe it's a good idea that now that a lot of people are working from home, that maybe we should, these businesses realize that maybe everybody should stay home. Whoever doesn't need to come in and just work from home, that's good for the environment and pollution and traffic and all that. But a patient of mine recently told me that she thought that if you work at home, then your home is not your home anymore, in the sense that you go home because that's your cocoon or your relaxation time. And now, if you work at home all the time, you will associate your home with the stresses and all the things that come from work. And I thought that's really an interesting thing to bring out. I never thought about that. So maybe people can not go to work maybe twice a week, and then the rest be home, or kind of break it apart, or do a week and not a week, or something like that. But that is an issue. So there's a lot of things that unfortunately this virus is gonna bring out that we don't have the answers to. Again, as I said, ideally we should all stay home until there's a vaccine, but people are just getting tired. Businesses need to come out and make money, and I don't know how a lot of these restaurants are going to survive, because they're being told to open up but like a third capacity. But restaurants have already a very thin margin. So I don't know how they can survive with just a third capacity. So maybe people will come up with new ideas, and do aggressive delivery or takeouts, or encourage takeouts in addition to having people come in. So it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen in the future. For now, that's all I have to say. Hopefully, it'll be interesting in a few years when we look back on this, and kind of see, why we behave this way and why this happened. It's interesting because if you look at the 1918 pandemic flu, and even before penicillin, penicillin was discovered in 1928. And we started actually using it in 1945. They started in Australia. And it was a miracle because every bacteria at that time was sensitive to penicillin. So it killed everything. It was a miracle drug. And then obviously bacteria became resistant. But prior to that, we had enough, even in 1918, we had enough data to know that there are these tiny microbes or whatever that causes disease, and so that we should do a lot of things that we do now. So it's really interesting because technologically humans have advanced so much from 1918 to now, but when we get to something like this, we're still using, things that were used 100 years ago. Basically wash your hands, social isolation, the usual stuff. And it'll be the same thing, in 100 years we could have all these really fine-tuned birth control pills and this and that. But if you want to be absolutely sure that you're never going to get pregnant, it's still celibacy, which is, a very primitive and old way of treating things, but they work. So, it is what it is. Sometimes we have to do, use old techniques because we don't have anything else to go by. All right, well, that's it for today. Be safe. Oh, again, I keep forgetting. So, some of you, obviously, who are over 65 who have medical issues, obviously you're more concerned, and I don't blame you, but remember, you cannot sterilize your environment. When I'm in a surgery room, everything is controlled, okay? The surgical tech only has her gown on and everything. Everything is sterilized. The patient is covered on a sterile drape. And I've talked to you about this before. When I scrub my hands and when I prep the patient's skin, that skin on my skin is not sterilized. The only way to sterilize skin is to, put myself in a sterilizer, which will kill me. So we're reducing the number of bacteria on the skin. So when a patient has normal immune system, the little amount of bacteria gets in there is, it's taken care of by the immune system. So, there's so much you can do. You cannot sterilize your environment, okay, unless you're in a controlled environment. I watch people very carefully when I go out with their masks and all that. They're breaking sterile technique left, and I even do that. This mask, sometimes I got to scratch my nose or I get stuffy. And even, the other thing about the masks, especially in the summer, I'm concerned. I know we're required to wear them everywhere, but one of the concerns I have is these masks obviously do not filter everything. And the N95 masks, if you wear them long term, people are getting, almost a hypoxia and headaches because you're not getting enough oxygen. So you cannot use those masks long term. But the concern I have is that some of these bacteria, whatever, that's normally in the air and pollution or is getting in there. And now with the hot weather that we are going to have, this humid environment, kind of like a petri dish. And so the mask may actually be more harm. And the CDC was looking at getting them off. But I don't know if because of maybe it's public hysteria, they're just afraid people are going to freak out. I don't know, but just keep that in mind. These masks necessarily may not be the best thing when the weather gets hot. If you're sweating in there, and it's probably going to help grow whatever is filtered through. So keep that in mind. But again, remember, this is how we get these viruses. So wash your hands before you touch your face. Ultimately, this is how we get them, unless somebody sneezes on you. So just, don't get too worried and just, be realistic, okay? All right, be safe, take care. I'll hopefully talk with you guys later. Thank you, bye-bye.